She was the woman even Pablo Escobar feared. For years, she lived off blood, fear, and millions in cash. But one day in Medellín, it all ended. 2 shots in broad daylight. To this day, there are no witnesses, no motive, no perpetrator. In this video, you'll learn who she was and why her murder still haunts the city. Early warning signs and enemy lists. Griselda Blanco did not have an ordinary list of enemies. She had an entire address book is full of people who would rather see her dead than her face. For decades, she was the epitome of brutality in the drug trade. Anyone who got involved with her, whether as a business partner, lover, or rival, knew that you couldn't just part ways with her on good terms. Even during her active years in the 1970s and 1980s, she collected enemies like others collect stamps. Some were former partners she had betrayed, others were families whose relatives she had eliminated. There were rival cartel bosses who had lost their positions of power because she had taken away their entire transport routes. And there were corrupt police officers who knew far too much about her to be allowed to stay alive. Even after her arrest and long years in prison, she was not forgotten in the underworld. In certain circles, she was still referred to as a walking deck book, a woman with whom every outstanding bill would one day have to be settled. What made Griselda dangerous was not only her past, but also her reputation. Stories about her cold-blooded acts of revenge were still circulating decades later. Many of these stories were so extreme that they sounded like urban legends. But in the underworld, people knew that there was often more to the rumors about Griselda than they would have liked. When she returned to Colombia after serving her prison sentence in the early 2000s, she was a living target. Some had been waiting for this moment for years, and in the end, that may have been exactly what cost her her life. Last year's in Medellín. When Griselda Blanco returned to Colombia in the early 2000s, she did so officially as a reformed woman. No more bodyguards, no more luxury villas, no more flashy cars. Instead, she lived in an apartment in a wealthier neighborhood of Medellín, far away from the slums where she had once grown up. To the public, it seemed as if she had left her past behind. But in Medellín, people don't forget. And certainly not when it comes to someone who has left hundreds of enemies behind. Old acquaintances from the underworld knew where she lived. Some watched her out of curiosity, others perhaps with less harmless intentions. Officially, she spent her days shopping, dining out, and visiting her family. But rumors persisted that she was still secretly investing money through strawmen, mainly in real estate and small businesses. Some even claimed that she still had contacts in the drug trade through middlemen, not to deliver herself, but to advise. It was a life between appearance and shadow. On the one hand, the retired businesswoman who had supposedly found peace. On the other hand, the legend who had been feared for years as the godmother of cocaine, a legend who still exuded power even in retirement. And that was precisely the problem. In a city like Medellín, even whispers about old power structures are enough to revive old scores. Everyone knew, as long as Griselda was breathing, there was someone who saw her death as an opportunity. The day of the murder, September 3, 2012. It was late Monday afternoon in Medellín. The heat of the day still lingered in the air when Griselda Blanco, then 69 years old, entered the Belén district. She was on her way to a small butcher's shop, a routine she reportedly often followed. No escort, no armored cars, just her and a companion. The shop looked inconspicuous and the street was quiet, but anyone who knows Medellín knows that quiet can be deceptive here. In the distance, a motorcycle appeared, occupied by 2 men. To outsiders, it was just one of hundreds that drove through the streets every day, but this ride had only one destination. While Griselda stood in the shop ordering meat, the passenger entered the room. No warning, no words. 2 targeted shots to the head. precise, cold-blooded, professional. The perpetrators disappeared as quickly as they had come. The most striking thing about it was exactly the method that Griselda herself had perfected in the 70s and 80s, the sicario on a motorcycle who strikes and disappears. An irony that immediately became the talk of Medellín. No witnesses dared to speak up. Surveillance cameras officially not functional. The police secured evidence, but there were no quick arrests, no hot leads. It was as if the murder had been planned to remain unsolved forever. Theories were circulating that same evening. Was it an old rival, a hitman acting on behalf of the victim's family, or even someone close to her? One thing was clear: this murder was no accident, but a settling of scores that someone had been waiting a long time for. If you're fascinated by real stories from the underworld, unfiltered and unvarnished, then click like and subscribe to the channel now. Here you'll find the stories that others only whisper about. Potential clients. To this day, it remains unclear who had Griselda Blanco killed. But in Medellín, there were more than enough people who had a motive. The list of suspects reads like half a history book of the Colombian drug war. First and foremost, former rivals. Even though many of the big bosses were long dead or in prison, splinter groups still existed. Remnants of the Medellín Cartel, smaller gangs that had once been humiliated or displaced by Griselda. For some, her death would be belated satisfaction. Then there were the families of the victims. For decades, she had ruled with an iron fist, having hundreds of people eliminated. For these families, it didn't matter that the murders had happened decades ago. Revenge has no statute of limitations in the underworld. Another theory points to political actors or corrupt officials. Griselda knew names, deals, and secret connections from a time when politics and cartels went hand in hand. Some believe that her knowledge was too dangerous to allow her to enjoy a peaceful old age. And then there is the darkest suspicion. Someone from her own circle. In the underworld, loyalty is often only as strong as the last cash flow. Perhaps it was a close confidant who was paid for her death, or who had an open account himself. Each of these possibilities is plausible, but without concrete evidence, everything remains speculation. What is certain is that the murder was no accident. It was planned, precisely executed, and covered up so thoroughly that the truth may never come to light. Why the case remains unsolved to this day. Officially, Griselda Blanco's murder is considered unsolved, but anyone familiar with Medellín knows that this is often just another way of saying too dangerous to solve. The first problem: no witnesses. Although there were passers-by in the vicinity at the time of the crime, no one claimed to have seen anything. In a city where plata or plomo, silver or lead, is still an unspoken law, making a statement often means signing your own death warrant. The second problem: lack of evidence. The surveillance cameras in the area were allegedly defective. The murder weapon never turned up, and the motorcycle on which the shooters fled disappeared without a trace. Whether this was a coincidence or deliberate manipulation remains a matter of debate to this day. Added to this is corruption. In the 2010s, Medellín's police force was not free from the influence of criminal networks. Some investigators are said to have maintained close contacts with gangs, and if the client was powerful enough, the case could very quickly disappear into a drawer. There is also a theory that the investigation was deliberately conducted half-heartedly, so as not to reopen old wounds. After all, a trial would not only have brought the perpetrators to light, but also old power structures, political entanglements, and perhaps names that are better left forgotten. The result? More than a decade after the murder, there are neither charges nor official suspects. In Medellín, people have long since accepted that the case will never be solved. And perhaps that is precisely the message the perpetrator wanted to send. Even a legend like Griselda Blanco can disappear, and no one will ever know the whole truth. Legacy and myth. Griselda Blanco was more than just a drug dealer. She became a figure who exists somewhere between reality and legend. Even her death only reinforced this myth. In Medellín, her name is still whispered today, often accompanied by stories that no one can officially confirm, but everyone seems to know. For some, she's the symbol of an era in which women not only played supporting roles in drug trafficking, but also ran entire empires themselves. For others, she's the embodiment of violence and greed, an example of how power always comes at a price. Her murder, still unsolved to this day, added a final layer of mystique to her story. It was like a full stop that simultaneously raised questions. Who had the courage to kill a woman who had been feared for decades? And why at this particular moment? Documentaries, books, and series have reinterpreted her biography, often dramatizing it, most recently the Netflix miniseries Griselda. But no matter how much Hollywood dramatizes her story, in Medellín, people remember the real woman. They remember the business deals, the bodies, the fear she left behind. Some say her end was the final reckoning, proof that no one is untouchable in the underworld. Others claim it was a silent warning to all those who believe they can retire after a life of crime. What remains is a name that will not fade away. Griselda Blanco may be dead, but in the alleys of Medellín, the story of the cocaine godmother lives on. Griselda Blanco is history, but the shadows she left behind continue to raise questions to this day. No one is safe in the underworld, not even those who once sat on the throne. If you want to learn more about the true reckonings, secrets, and unexplained deaths of the criminal elite, subscribe to the channel now. Here you'll get the stories that others dare not tell, and the truth that only the streets know.